measure. Yeah. So let us look at this year's Mains Public Administration Paper 1. So what are the important trends that we can notice here looking at this paper? What are the important trends? First and foremost, UPSC is focusing more on analysis. As you can see, the entire paper is analytical. It is focusing a lot more on analysis. Second, what you can see here is that it is mostly based on current developments in public administration. All the major current developments in public administration. Then the third important thing that we can notice here is looking at this paper is it is focusing on application aspects of public administration. It is not focusing on more concepts or theories. Sometime back, 2012-2013 was the period when it focused more on theoretical aspects of public administration. The paper looked like the question paper of a university or a research organization. Now they are making it more application oriented, more analytical, and more related to current events. This is what we can say. So let us look at the questions, starting with the section A. What we must remember here is that for these 10 markers, this is what I would always say, for these 10 markers, the answer is always there in the question itself. Once you understand the question, the statement, it is very easy to write the answer. That we can see through these questions also. Strength of public administration. The strength of public administration is in its exploration of the complexities and nuances of public policy making and implementation. Discuss. So let us try to understand the question itself. As I said, once we understand it, it is very easy to write answers. The strength of public administration. So what do we mean by that? The strong points of public administration lies in its ability to explore the complexities and the nuances of public policy making and implementation. Basically, what we are doing here is that we are trying to define this public administration from a public policy perspective. That is what we said from 1970s onwards. What we say is that the locus and focus of the entire discipline of public administration is defined only from public policy perspective. So why this public administration has gained so much of importance from 1970s onwards? All over the world, as we keep on saying, it is one of the fastest growing academic disciplines. It is one of the most important academic disciplines. Why? Because this public policy analysis is the core of public administration. This public policy analysis involves policy formulation and policy implementation. Whether it is a developing country or a developed country, whether it is a poor country or a rich country, whether it is a communist regime or a capitalist regime, at the end of the day, every country wants to maximize welfare of its own citizens to retain their legitimacy. Please remember, countries like communist China also, they always look to maximize the welfare of their people only. Why? Because if the people's per capita income is very high, if the standard of life is very high, normally they do not ask for anything else. Economic democracy is more important than political democracy. Per capita income of China is more than $10,000. That is the reason why you don't find people revolting against the governments. So that is the reason why Chinese government, or for that matter any other government in the world, it looks at maximizing welfare of its citizens. And why public administration has become so much important in the recent times is because of its ability to understand the complexities of public policy analysis. It is its ability to come out with the proper solutions to the complexities involved in public policy analysis in terms of both the policy formulation as well as implementation. And that is the reason why if you look at this year's question paper also, maximum number of questions were asked from public policy perspective. Almost all the questions were asked from, can be answered from public policy perspective also. As the question says itself, the biggest strength of this academic discipline of public administration is that it explores, it also understands, it analyzes the complexities and nuances involved in public policy formulation and implementation. So for this, in policy formulation, we have so many models. We have the incrementalist paradigm, we also have the rationalist paradigm, and we have the strategic planning paradigm, which is a combination of incrementalist and rationalist paradigm. Similarly, when it comes to policy implementation, we have this authoritative model, then we speak about a participative model, then we talk about the coalition of actors model, which is nothing but what is called networking governance now, and we also have this endless learning model. What all these models explain to us is how to make public policies more efficient, how to ensure that public policies reflect the concerns, demands and wishes of people, and how to make sure that these public policies satisfy the needs of the people, so that the discipline of public administration would retain its relevance. As we keep on saying all the time, any academic discipline has its relevance only for as long as it is helping the practitioners to come out with solutions to the problems faced by them. This public administration has become very popular, extremely significant, because of the fact that it helps us to understand the complexities, nuances of public policies, formulation and implementation, and not only that, it also helps us to come out with solutions also. So many other solutions were given in other questions. As we proceed with other questions, we will know that the entire question paper is nothing but about public policy analysis only. You give the examples here also. You can give, if you want, you can give examples also. For example, once we realized this elite mass model has not been successful in India, centralized planning process, top-down approach to implementation, we have opted for participatory decision making process by decentralizing power to the lowest levels in the form of 73rd, 74th amendment. Similarly, we also have opted for a coalition of actors model in terms of policy implementation also. So that is what you have to write for this question. Next, principles of analysis and principles of action were not differentiated in Taylor's scientific management theory. Comment. Yes.
What are the complexities and nuances are in this?
Yeah, that is what, what are the complexities? These complexities and nuances are explained with the help of these models, public policy making models, rationalist paradigm and incrementalist paradigm. They help us. What we say is that public policy at the end of the day is nothing but politics. It is about winning elections and retaining power. But that is necessary but not sufficient, because you must maximize the welfare of people. You must also ensure that citizens are empowered. That is the reason why we talk about a rationalist paradigm also, making public policies much more closer to reality. Otherwise, they will be a failure. Then come to the next question. The principles of analysis and principles of action were not differentiated in Taylor's scientific management. As usual, when we talk about these kind of statements, you always have to focus on the why aspect of the question. So let us try to understand what the question means. Principles of analysis and principles of action. were not differentiated in scientific management theory. Analysis and action, that means the theory part as well as in scientific management theory. Analysis and action, that means the theory part as well as the action part or implementation part. They are not differentiated in Taylor's scientific management theory. Why they are not differentiated is should be the crux of your answer. Why they are not differentiated? For the simple reason that Taylor had come up with the scientific management theory for industrial organizations at the lowest level. That is what is called shop floor level. Shop floor level. For lowest, at the lowest level. At the lowest level, you don't differentiate between theory and practice. At the lowest level, you don't make any kind of difference between the theory and practice. You don't make any kind of difference between analysis and action. Through action, you will analyze. Through analysis, you will also implement it. That is the reason why what Frederick Taylor has done is, as part of his scientific management theory, he conducted experiments, extensive experiments in his own organization on the basis of this nano study, time study, work study, motion study. And through those experiments, he had come out with the principles of scientific management, which again were implemented at the ground level. And when you look at them, there was not much of a difference between the theory and practice. That is what we say. Whereas if you look at other thinkers, whereas if you say someone like Henry Fayol's administrative management theory, he had come out with principles of management, which mostly through his analysis but not through implementation at the ground level. He had observed the functioning of organizations at various levels over a period of time. On the basis of that, he had come out with those principles. Whereas in case of Taylor, if remember, this is what we say always say in the class. In case of Taylor was not at all interested in any organization. He was not interested in at any level. He was only interested in industrial organization, that too at the shop floor level. That is the reason why there was no difference between analysis and action. For example, when you are writing answers, you are thinking as well as writing answers. There is no difference between analysis and action. In the same manner, when the workers are working, through his experiments, he was coming out with the principles, and those principles again were implemented simultaneously at the ground level in the form of what he called it as one best way of performing the task. And how did the managers come out with this one best way of performing the task? On the basis of the experiments and the observations of the outcomes. That is the reason why both of them go together. Yes.
So can we say it was more prescriptive in nature and there was no feedback mechanism?
Exactly. It was, that is what we said. Classical theories were always prescriptive in nature. And that is one of the reasons why it has also failed. You cannot say that either my way or highway. That is where it has failed. Taylor, he had come out with this one best way and believed that this is the only way the organization can maximize. But, to be fair to Taylor, his scientific management theory was tremendously successful also. So we cannot blindly criticize Taylor also. So why? Because as we have said that Taylor was basically a practicing, you can say he was basically a practicing engineer. At the end of the day, scientific management theory was basically for those industrial organizations at the lowest level. That is the reason why we say that Taylor had come out with operating procedures to be applied in specific situations. Operating procedure to be applied in specific situations, but later those operating procedures had become universal principles because of their universal applicability. Whatever the operating procedures he had come out with, whether it is scientific recruitment, division of work, scientific training, piece rate system, all of them had become what we call the principles of organization, which have to be followed by any organization at any level, at any point of time. That is how scientific management theory had become a universal theory. Next, arbitrariness in the application of rule of law is a primary cause of poor governance. This is what we study all the time. in administrative law and rule of law. The basic problem is that rule of law inherently has what we call discretionary powers. If you remember, this is what we studied in our classes all the time. The rule of law always has scope for discretion. Why there is scope for discretion in rule of law? Even constitutional law. Rule of law is nothing but constitutional law. Why there is scope for discretion in rule of law? Because it is not possible to visualize all the situations that is going to happen and come out with specific laws, rules and regulations. That is the reason why, as we have discussed in rule of law, what we have said is that this rule of law is only for generalized situations, generalized environment. In specific situations, discretionary powers are given. Take our constitution also. The President of India is given the discretionary powers to select Prime Minister in case of a political party not getting majority on the floor of the House. A governor is given the discretionary power to again appoint a chief minister in case of a hung assembly. These discretionary powers are integral part of rule of law. That is where we discussed A.V. Dicey. He was wrong also with his concept of rule of law, because discretionary powers are an integral part of rule of law. But the problem here is that there is always a scope of this discretionary power being transformed into arbitrary use of power, and that is what the question says. This arbitrary use of power under rule of law is the primary cause of poor governance. That is the reason why we must reduce the scope, if we not eliminate the scope for arbitrary use of power. How to reduce this scope for arbitrary use of power in application of rule of law? How to reduce the scope for arbitrary use of power in application of rule of law? That is what you have to write as part of answer. Your answer should always be prescriptive. Once we explain the statement, then you have to come out with the solutions. How to reduce the scope for arbitrary use of power? Yes, have more transparency, more accountability, and also define discretionary powers in a more specific manner. Those three things you must have. Next, departments, boards and commissions as forms of organization are dissimilar in the context of accountability and responsibility. Analyze. So, understanding the statement again becomes very important here. Departments, boards and commissions as forms of organization are dissimilar in the context of accountability and responsibility. So, what is the difference between a department and a board and a commission? What is the difference here? Departments, boards and commissions as forms of organization are dissimilar in the context of accountability and responsibility. The key word here is they are dissimilar in the context of accountability and responsibility. What is the dissimilarity here? Who heads a department? A department is headed by a single person. Departments are monocratic form of organization. They are monocratic form of organization. Mono means single. They are monocratic form of organization. That means in case of departments, the authority and responsibility is vested in the hands of a single person. It is vested in the hands of a single person. It is the same person is responsible, the same person is also accountable. He also has the authority. Whereas boards and commissions are what we call them as examples of collegiate form of organizations. Collegiate form of organizations. Collegiate form of organization means collective responsibility. Collective responsibility. If you remember, this is what we discussed, how to reduce this bureaucratic power. How to reduce this bureaucratic power? One of the important means of reducing this bureaucratic power is through boards and commissions, wherein the power is distributed among boards and commissions, wherein the power is distributed among a group of people, and wherein the responsibility and accountability is shared by a group of people, wherein authority also is shared among a group of people. What you call it as collective decision making. Collective decision making. For example, take the case of election commission. These kind of questions you have to explain with the help of mostly examples only. Take the case of election commission. Initially, for a very long period of time in India, election commission was a single member body in India, even though it was a commission form of organization, but the government never really bothered to make it a multi-member body till TN Session was the election commissioner. TN Session was the election commissioner. In election commission was only a single member body. Then what happened later? Then what happened? When TN Session started using the power in an arbitrary manner, then the government felt it that they must reduce the bureaucratic power. Because whenever the power is in the hands of a single person, it can result in dictatorial use of the power. That is the reason why, what did the government do? The government made election commission a multi-member body. And it has said that the decisions have to be taken either through unanimity or through consensus. That is what the question says. They are dissimilar in the context of accountability and responsibility. Pardon? That's a different thing. Whether he has reformed election commission or not, that's a different thing. But what we are talking about here is, how the departments are different from boards and commissions. Take the case of UPSC, Union Public Service Commission. Take the case of Finance Commission. Take the case of Central Board of Direct Taxes. So here, what is common to all of them is collective decision making, either through consensus or through unanimity. That is the reason why here collective responsibility and collective accountability also. Whereas in case of departments, it is only a monocratic form of organization. This is what we say here. And which one is better? Which one is better? It is always better to have a collegiate form of organization. Similarly, that is the reason why we have Finance Commission, Election Commission, all those things. Yeah.
Can we also mention that commissions, the recommendations they make are advisory in nature, but the department, they take the decisions?
Yeah, that is what, in case of departments, as we have said, the power of the head of the department is mandatory. That means his orders have to be implemented. There is no scope for any choice. Whereas here, the recommendations are mostly on the basis of consensus. They will be implemented. Next, administrative man bridges the psychological man and the rational man. This is a very direct question. This is what we say. We talk about economic man. At one end of the spectrum, you have economic man. At the other end of the spectrum, you have social man. In between, you have administrative man. Economic man takes completely rational decisions. We call them as optimal decisions. Social man takes completely irrational decisions. Why? Because his decisions are always guided by emotions, sentiments and feelings. And what we say that this administrative man is capable of taking completely rational decisions, but won't be able to do so because of so many limitations. That is the reason why he takes decisions, what we call them as satisficing decisions on the basis of bounded rationality. He is the bridge between the social man and administrative man. And another thing what we said is that when economic man takes decisions, he takes decisions only on the basis of what is called rational cost benefit analysis. Administrative man is also capable of taking these rational cost benefit analysis decisions, but he won't take because he has to take into consideration values also. Administrators should always take into consideration values. Otherwise, there is no justification for administration. As we say, public organizations cannot be run like a private business organizations. That is the reason why administrative man bridges the psychological man and the rational man. These are all very direct questions. So, from this, let us move on to the other questions. Let us look at other questions. Second question. The movement towards governance as an organizing concept of public administration and management is because of the focus of administration has been shifting from bureaucratic state to the hollow state and third party government. Critically examine. As I said, all these questions are current events in public administration. All of them are related to current events. So, if you look at public administration, basically we have moved from a welfare state to what we call it as entrepreneurial state. So, here bureaucracy plays the most important role in a welfare state. They are responsible for everything. They are responsible for allocation of resources. They are responsible for production of goods and services. They are responsible for distribution of the output. They are responsible for bringing about socio-economic transformation. They are also responsible for providing goods and services to the people. They are responsible for running large-scale public sector enterprises. They are responsible for ultimately law and order, generation of revenue, you name it, everything. But what we have witnessed in recent times in public administration is from a welfare state, as the question says, the focus of administration has shifted from a bureaucratic state to a hollow state. What is a hollow state? What is the meaning of the term hollow? Hollow means? Yes, which is insignificant, which is empty, which is not there, hollow situation. So, what we are saying here is that in case of a hollow state, the government is not directly responsible. The government is not directly responsible for providing services to the citizens. In a welfare state, as we have discussed, all the services were provided by the government directly to the people. In a hollow state, government is not directly responsible for the services to be provided to the people. Then who will be providing? As the question says, third party government. So you have the government, you have the people, in between you have private sector, which will be providing services to the people. There is no direct provision of services to the people by the government. It can be private sector, it can be NGOs, it can be civil society organizations, it can be beneficiary groups, you name it. It can be through public-private partnerships. So the question says the movement towards governance. That is what governance basically means. What governance means? Taking decisions and implementing those decisions. The movement towards governance has shifted from this bureaucratic state, wherein the state performed all the functions without any intermediaries, without any other institutions, with the state enjoying absolute monopoly, to hollow state, wherein the state did not take direct responsibility for providing services, to third party government as part of this hollow state, NPM, new public management. And third party government, in third party government we are not only talking about the private sector, we are talking about everyone else. For example, take the case of Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. It is being implemented with the help of Abhiyan. It is being implemented with the help of NGOs. Take the case of NRHM. It is implemented with the help of NGOs. Take the case of majority of the schemes of the government. For example, in the recent migrant crisis also, who are the ones who provided service to the people? It was the NGOs and civil society organizations. And NGOs and civil society organizations, they get the money from the government. Government will provide money and they will provide services to the people. Third party government. That is how governance has expanded, or governance has changed over a period of time. Initially everything was done by the state with no participation of third sector, either markets or NGOs. But later, from there we moved towards this entrepreneurial government, wherein the market provided in the form of public-private partnership. But when this public-private partnership proved to be insufficient, then we have this third sector, NGO sector, voluntary sector. That is the reason why now we talk about what is called NPG, New Public Governance, wherein multiple institutions would be providing services, with the state acting as what you call a staff organization, providing all the necessary assistance and help to the institutions involved in governance. The scope of the word this governance, the scope of administration has expanded. That is the reason why third Minnowbrook conference also has clearly mentioned that public administration includes all the activities of all organizations which work within the framework of rule of law, with the objective of maximizing welfare of people, with the objective of bringing about the socio-economic transformation. That is what we say. No country in the world at this point of time has a complete absolute monopoly of the state, including the communist dictatorial regimes also. China has what is called state-led capitalism. China is not a communist country, it has state-led capitalism, public-private partnerships. So this is what you have to write, and you have to give lots of examples in the form of all the public-private partnerships, and in the form of the increasing role of these NGOs, civil society organizations, beneficiary associations, self-help groups, and other voluntary sector as part of third-party government. So that as we discussed in NPG, New Public Governance, the role of the state, the role of governance at this point of time is how to reconcile the conflicting interests of all the institutions involved in governance and ensure consensus, ultimately with the objective of empowering citizens. This is what we have discussed in the class. This is the present status of what we call the governance or public administration. The same question they have asked. Next, organizations of the future will be organic adaptive structures but temporary systems. Discuss how Warren Bennis characterizes the new forms of organization. Again, we have spoken about these things in our classes. Warren Bennis, he has predicted the end of bureaucracy. Has predicted the end of bureaucracy. So what did he say? He said that this Weberian, all-encompassing generalist bureaucracy would be replaced with, small agencies performing specific functions, manned by specialists. That is what Warren Bennis has predicted. He predicted the end of bureaucracy. We have discussed these things as part of bureaucracy and development. That is the reason why some of his predictions had become True also in the form of NPM. What is this new public management? Disaggregation of public bureaucracies into small agencies providing specific services to people on the basis of rational cost benefit analysis. Adaptive system, organic adaptive systems. Adaptive means changing yourself according to the changing circumstances. Organic, dynamic system. Weberian bureaucracy is static, inorganic system. Warren Bennis has predicted that this Weberian bureaucracy with its mechanical structures, closed systems and with so many dysfunctionalities would disappear with the development of societies. And some of his predictions had become right also with the advent of new public management. But unfortunately, his philosophy was partially right. Why? Because this NPM was not that much highly successful. But at the same time, we cannot say that his philosophy is completely wrong also, because all over the world at this point of time within the bureaucracy, the clamor is more towards specialization, lateral entry. Because as we say, the only thing that is constant in this world is change. The Weberian bureaucracy is always resistant to change. That is the reason why you have to make it outcome oriented. You have to make it a skill. You must impart more skills to the bureaucracy. That is the reason why we are talking about making bureaucracy, Weberian bureaucracy, more efficient by introducing competition through lateral entry. And we are also talking about making Weberian bureaucracy more efficient by imparting new skills to them, by changing the structures of Weberian bureaucracy, by making them much more flexible, organic. That is what we say. So definitely Warren Bennis' prediction is still valid for all the countries around the world. Why? Because this is what is needed for countries around the world. So that is what you have to write. That is what even we talk about in contingency theories also. What do the contingency thinkers say all the time? Contingency thinkers always say that you must change the organization structure, attitude, functioning, behavior and values depending on what is happening outside as well as inside within the organization. An unfit organization should be made again fit by changing the structures, procedures and values. That is what Warren Bennis also had spoken about. Next, productivity is not the result of working conditions but the result of emotional response of workers to work performed. Elton Moyo's findings relevant in contemporary organizations. This question, the same question I have given in our test series last year, 2019 I have given the same question. Both of us have picked up the statement from Elton Moyo only. Both of us have copied, both UPSC and myself, both of us have copied from Elton Moyo. But in India, copyrights laws are very weak, so we can copy easily. So basically what the statement says, that is what we study in human relations thinkers. When these Hawthorne experiments were conducted, these Hawthorne experiments were conducted on the basis of the premise of these classical theories, mostly scientific management theory. Three important features of scientific management theory. One is physical working conditions. Second one is supervisory styles. Third one is salary, money. These are the three factors that will influence workers' productivity in organizations. But at the end of those experiments, what Elton Moyo and his team have concluded is that these factors may be necessary but not sufficient. Workers' efficiency and productivity is not dependent on these factors. And what are the factors that influence workers' efficiency and productivity? Social and psychological factors. It is the emotional needs of the workers which the management must take into consideration to maximize the efficiency of workers. Why? Because organization is not a physical structure. Elton Mayo has proved through his experiments that organization is not a physical structure, it is a social system consisting of dynamic human beings. Through his experiments, he has proved that if the organizations take care of the social and psychological needs of the workers, automatically they would maximize the efficiency. Through his human relations theory, he has proved that there is direct correlation between the satisfaction of the workers and efficiency and productivity of the workers. This is mostly a direct question. Are these findings relevant in contemporary organizations? That is what the question says. Are they relevant? Yes, they are definitely relevant. Why? Why they are relevant in contemporary organizations? Why? Because contemporary organizations are mostly in the service sector. At this point of time, if we look at the GDPs of countries around the world, which sector contributes maximum to the GDPs of countries around the world? Service sector. Even in a poor country like India, also it is the service sector, which contributes more than 55% to its GDP. And in service sector, what is the most important factor of production? Human resources. That is the reason why Mayo's theory becomes extremely important. That is what we say. That is the reason why we called Elton Mayo the father of behavioralism long before the term behavioralism had become popular within public administration. And he had proved to be the most important thinker, because other behavioral thinkers like Herbert Simon or Chester Bernard or other post-behavioral thinkers, they have derived all their ideas and concepts from Elton Mayo. It is extremely relevant. That is the reason why people working in organization nowadays are called human resources. So that is what you have to write. Does it mean that classical theories have no significance? Not at all. What is required is a combination of classical and behavioral. That is how you have to conclude. The conclusion should be a combination of classical and behavioral thinkers. Next, performance information use is a form of organizational behavior that is influenced by individual, job, organizational and environmental factors. Critically analyze. So when these kind of questions come, how to tackle them? Performance information use, as the name itself, as the term itself says, performance information use. What do you mean by that? Performance information use means how we can utilize the performance of an employee in the organization for the betterment of the organization. Very simple term. As I said, you can answer all the questions with little bit of common sense. That is what is called analysis also. So this is what we say. At the end of the day, an organization is as efficient as its own people. When the people working in the organization are efficient, automatically organization also becomes efficient. That is the reason why we say human resources. Organization does not mean tables or chairs or laptops or broadband. Organization means human resources. Now the question that comes up is, how can we use the performance evaluation of people working in the organization to influence their functioning, behavior and attitudes? That is what we say. Whatever may be the thinker, at the end of the day, what we say is that what exactly really motivates the people to work better for the organization? What really motivates the people to work better for the organization? If the organization recognizes and rewards their performance. That is what we say. The difference between a private organization and a public organization is, in private organization, this performance information use is done in a very scientific and rational manner, which motivates the employees. That is the reason why they are more efficient. Now the next question that comes up, as the question itself says, is that how to evaluate this performance. How to evaluate this performance and how to use that information. This is what we say 360-degree performance evaluation. That is what it says. You are evaluating the performance in terms of individual performance. This is what we study in personal administration. You are combining personal administration along with organizational theories. So you evaluate the performance in terms of individual, from the point of view of the group he is working, from the point of view of the entire organization, right? And again, as the question says, from the point of view of your relation with other employees. In our classes, if you remember, that is what we have said. You might be an excellent person in terms of performing the job all alone, but when it comes to having human relations, better communication and coordination skills, you can be a zero. I gave you the example also in our classes of an IAS officer, who was an excellent individually, but was a complete failure when it comes to working with a group. That was the reason why you are doing is, you are using this information. You are using this information to influence organizational behavior. That means to influence the behavior of people working within the organization. That is what this is one of the newest techniques that had come up in public administration as part of organizational behavior. Why? Because at the end of the day, you are a leader. At the end of the day, you are a decision maker. At the end of the day, you have to motivate your people. At the end of the day, you have to ensure better coordination among the people. You have to ensure resolving conflicts among the people. When I am evaluating your performance, I will evaluate your performance in terms of all these things. And I will use this information. I will use this information for the betterment of the organization. And I will use this information to improve your own performance and also for the overall betterment of the organization. That is what we study in personal administration also. The question was also asked, performance management and evaluation systems. The objective is to motivate the people to improve their performance by identifying their strengths and their weaknesses also. That is the reason why we are talking about both, as we keep on saying, both the structural as well as behavioral thinkers. If you look at structural thinkers, their performance evaluation is very simple. It is simple and quantitative in nature. In case of scientific management theory, performance evaluation means, how many units you have produced. But that is necessary but not sufficient, because organizations nowadays are living in a highly dynamic environment wherein the people are expected to have so many abilities, mostly emotional intelligence also. This is what you have to write. Especially in case of bureaucracy, it becomes much more important. Why? Because bureaucracy have to work in a extremely difficult environment. Work environment is completely complicated for a bureaucracy. There are so much of political pressure, there is so much of media pressure, there is so much of opposition pressure, there is so much of pressure from NGOs. So when I am evaluating your performance, I will look at all these environmental factors also. Yes. Law of the situation, we are not talking about the law of the situation here, because when I am evaluating performance, I am evaluating performance over a period of time in different situations. So I am taking the average performance. So that is what you say, critically analyze. But what is the problem here is, as we study with the 360-degree performance evaluation also, what is the problem here is it possible to evaluate performance on the basis of all these parameters, especially within public bureaucracies? Is it possible? That is where the problem. Theoretically, it is a very good concept. In practical terms, it is almost, you can say, impossible. For example, if I am asking, your subordinates, I am evaluating your performance. If I ask your subordinates to give their opinion, can they give their opinion in a free and frank manner? It is not possible. That is where sometimes these things will become difficult. And of course, in private organizations, what do? They take the opinion of what you call the customers. They take the opinion of the consumers. That is the reason why whenever you make any call, immediately you will get another call saying that this is for performance evaluation. Are you satisfied with the performance? If you are satisfied, give them 1 or 2, between 1 to 10 any ratings. You will give 0. So that is what we do. So, but in the government, all those bureaucrats who are working, they are not directly related to citizens on a day-to-day life. Especially when you are working in the secretariat organizations, Central Secretariat or Cabinet Secretariat or PMO. Do they come into contact with the clients here, the citizens? Then how do we evaluate their performance? And another problem here is that all the staff organizations, their power is only advisory in nature. At the end of the day, final decisions will be taken by political executive. That is where the problems. You have to talk about all the problems also here. It can be this 360-degree performance evaluation by taking into consideration individual, job, organizational, environmental factors can be a good performance evaluation that can influence organizational behavior in private organizations but not in public organizations. That should be your conclusion. Next, new public service emphasizes democracy and citizenship as the basis for public administration theory and practice. Elucidate. This is what we have discussed also extensively in the class. What we say here is that Denhard and Denhard, who had come out with this new public service approach, they had identified the weaknesses of NPM. As we said, if you remember, this is what we said. In a welfare state, bureaucracy is only morally responsible to citizens. Morally responsible to citizens, people. And that is the reason why people were treated as subjects to be governed. They were treated as subjects to be governed. In an NPM state, what you call it as entrepreneurial state, the bureaucracy considers itself as a service provider and people are treated as customers, so that bureaucracy is legally accountable to people. Legally accountable to people. But as we discussed, there are so many limitations with this approach. Why? Because when you are considering people as customers, that means you are only including those sections who can pay for services. What about the vast sections of society? Poor people who cannot pay for those services. That is the reason why Denhard and Denhard has said that both these approaches are wrong. What they have called it as NPS, New Public Service Approach. Here, we are not treating either people as either subjects to be governed or as customers to be treated, served. But you are treating people as citizens to be empowered. That is what is called NPS approach. That is the reason why the entire basis of this NPS approach is, one is democracy. Second one is, as we have said, citizenship. In the name of democracy, you are giving choices to the people. That is what NPM also talks about. NPM basically talks about giving choices to the people. And in a welfare state, you are empowering the citizens. People, you are empowering the people. So, as part of NPS approach, as we have discussed, bureaucracy gives importance to all 4 E's. economy, efficiency, effectiveness, equity. Economy and efficiency you find in NPM. Effectiveness and equity, NPA. Combine both of them, you will get NPS. That is what you have to write. Next question, similar question. Accountability under new public management has undergone a radical change, although the focus has continued to remain on management. A similar question, if not the same, similar question. So let us see what he is trying to say here. So it starts with politics administration dichotomy. Everything starts with politics administration dichotomy. The starting point of Weberian bureaucracy, politics administration dichotomy. So what do we say here as part of politics administration dichotomy? Political executive is responsible for policy formulation and bureaucracy for implementation. Right? Bureaucracy for implementation. And how this accountability of bureaucracy is ensured in Weberian bureaucracy? How accountability of bureaucracy is ensured in Weberian bureaucracy? How do you evaluate the performance of bureaucracy according to Max Weber? Yes, in terms of their ability to implement rules and regulations. Max Weber has said that bureaucracy is nothing but only an instrument. It is nothing but only an instrument in the hands of political executive. Political executive takes policy decisions, and the responsibility of bureaucracy is only on implementation. Again go back. What is the difference between administration and management? What is the difference between administration and management? Administrators take decisions and managers implement the decisions. So the focus is always only on implementation. Right? Now, what are the changes that NPM has brought about here in this Weberian bureaucracy? What are the changes that NPM has brought about in Weberian bureaucracy? Yes, in NPM what it has done? It has focused only on implementation, that is management. But accountability has changed. Earlier accountability in terms of implementation of rules and regulations, now accountability in terms of economy and efficiency. Accountability in terms of providing goods and services to people. Accountability in terms of treating people as customers. That is what NPM has brought about, the changes. So how this accountability has changed? Earlier this accountability was internal. You are accountable to your superior in terms of implementing the rules and regulations. And if you violate the rules and regulations, what I will do? Immediately I will suspend you for violating rules and regulations. Now, in case of an NPM state, your accountability is not internal, your accountability is external towards the people. For example, give this one, this Public Services Delivery Acts that have been passed by so many state governments. If you are a clerk working in say in a revenue department of a district, a person has applied for a ration card and he has all he has submitted all the documents. If he is not getting the ration card within a period of 15 days or 20 days, then I will fix accountability on you. I will impose fine. I will say that you have to pay the fine of 500 rupees for not delivering the ration card within stipulated time period. That is how what we say NPM state. With external formed within stipulated time period. That is how what we say NPM state. With external forms of accountability. Now accountability is in terms of reducing the cost of production. Accountability in terms of attracting the consumers. Accountability in terms of providing quality goods and services to the citizens. Accountability in terms of having effective responsive mechanisms. Accountability in terms of having efficient grievance redressal mechanisms. These are all the features of what we call private administration. That is what the question says. Accountability under new public management has undergone a radical change. All the focus has remained on management, means implementation. Whether it is new public management or the previous welfare state of Max Weber's traditional bureaucracy, the focus was only on management. That is the reason why when we study NPM, what we say is that NPM's starting point is also politics, administration, dichotomy. Bureaucracy is only responsible. Even in an NPM state also, bureaucracy will not take any decisions. Decisions are taken by someone else and they are expected to implement the decisions. That is what you have to write for this question. Next. Administrative law. Developments in the field of administrative law reflect an increasingly blurred boundary between the state and the society, between the justice and administration. Has administrative law become more constitutional than constitutional law itself? I argue. In fact, in our test series this year, I have given the same question. Of course, both of us copied the same question from same source. Intelligent people always think alike. So I have given the same question, that has administrative law become so more constitutional than the constitution itself. So what the question says here is that administrative law in recent times has expanded so much in terms of its scope that there is no difference between what is administrative law and what is constitutional law. That is what we say. Here, an increasingly blurred boundary between the state and the society, between the justice and administration. Has administrative law become more constitutional than constitution itself? Normally, what is the perception here is that this administrative law is contrary to the concept of rule of law, or what you call it as constitutional law. This is what A.V. Dicey perception. That is the reason why Dicey was totally against administrative law. He called administrative law a necessary evil, a devil. He called administrative law an evil and a devil. But in reality, administrative law is not in contradiction to constitutional law. It supplements. Sometimes we have reached a situation wherein now administrative law is substituting constitutional law also. The lines between administrative law and constitutional law have become so blurred that it becomes difficult for us to differentiate between what is constitutional law and what is administrative law. We have given so many examples. Take the case of, as I said, this Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, right to information, right to education. This right to education, 86th Constitutional Amendment Act, which is part of constitutional law. This Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan is administrative law. This Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, the government has come out with this program as part of administrative law to realize the objectives enshrined in the constitutional law. So this SSA, Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, can we call it as administrative law or constitutional law? It is more constitutional than constitutional law. Similarly, take this NREGA, right to employment is one of the directive principles of our state policy. And you can say that right to employment can be part of fundamental rights also by expanding the scope of Article 21. Right to life and liberty includes right to employment also. So, can we say that this NREGA, is it administrative law or constitutional law? Similarly, take the case of this NRHM, National Rural Health Mission, or the Ayushman Bharat, the scheme that the government recently started. Right to life is a fundamental right. To realize that, we have come out with this administrative law. Similarly, take the case of this protection of the rights of tribals in a tribal Forest Rights Act. It is part of administrative law, but it is to fulfill the directive principles of state policy, protection of environment, ecological systems. Similarly, give other examples here wherein we don't find any difference between administrative law and constitutional law. Take the case of this right to information, administrative law. And the government, as part of global constitutionalism, what we have done, we have vastly expanded the scope of the constitutional values, which include transparency in administration. That is the reason why we have passed this right to information, whose basic objective is to ensure transparency in administration, which is fundamental to our constitutional governance. Similarly, you give these, as I said, these public service delivery acts. Basically, the objective is to ensure accountability, which is the crux of our constitution. Our entire constitution is all about how to ensure accountability of executive towards citizens. We have come out with these laws. So, as you can see here, we have come out with so many administrative laws in the last 25 years or so, that at this point of time, we can say that there is no difference between what is administrative law and what is constitutional law. Similarly, take the case of Food Security Act, administrative law. Food Security Act. It is nothing but fulfilling fundamental rights, right to life. Food Security Act. Right? So these are all, at the end of the day, there is no difference between justice and administration. Justice is what you find in Constitution, and it is the administration which is expected to realize the ideals, the justice that is there in the Constitution. And that is the reason why we are coming out with all these administrative laws. The entire rights-based approach to governance, again the question was asked, I think the next question only, the entire rights-based approach to governance is nothing but administrative law only. The ultimate objective of this rights-based approach to governance is empowerment of citizens, which is what our constitutional forefathers have envisaged in our constitution. That is the reason why the preamble starts with we the people of India. Ultimately, the power should be lying in the hands of the people. These administrative laws are the mechanisms through which we can ensure empowerment of citizens between the state and the society. These are the things, as I said, all these questions have to be answered only with the help of examples. That's why I always say that if you have to write good marks, good answers in paper 1, you should always have very good knowledge of Indian administration. Next, the content and process theories of motivation have the same focus but are different in approaches. Do you agree? Yes, this is what we have said. Content theories of motivation and process theories of motivation. Content theories of motivation basically talk about what of motivation, whereas process theories of motivation, how to realize that motivation, what is there in motivation. So that is the reason why in content theories of motivation, we have so many theories. We speak about Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, then Herzberg's two-factor theory, McLean's theory of needs, Alder's ERG theory. All these things are there in our printed material also. All these theories are there. And whereas when we talk about process theory of motivation, we talk about all these theories are there. And whereas when we talk about process theory of motivation, we talk about Stacey Adams' equity theory, expectancy theory. Again, these things are there in our notes directly. These are all very direct questions. Yes, we definitely agree that they talk about the same thing, but they adopt different approaches. Which one is a more pragmatic? Process theories of motivation. Why? Because process theories of motivation are based on the assumption that satisfaction is not absolute but relative. That is why Stacey Adams talks about reward and effort. What is the amount of effort I am putting and what is the reward I am getting, and what is the amount of effort other person is putting and what is the reward he is getting. If I am putting more effort but I am getting the same kind of reward as the other person, then I will be demotivated. That is the reason why we discuss in the class also, the government is doing a criminal thing when it increases the salaries and allowances of all employees in an uniform manner. What is required is equity but not equality. So a person, an IAS officer who is working very hard, an IPS officer who works for 20 hours a day, gets the same kind of salary increment as a corrupt officer, then what is the motivation for this officer to perform? That is the reason why private organizations are more efficient. And that is the reason why pay commissions always said the same thing. Every pay commission, right from first pay commission till the last pay commission, the seventh pay commission, all of them have asked about only one thing. They said that to fix the basic salary and increase any other kind of increment in their emoluments should be on the basis of their performance. That is what we say. This is again a very straightforward question. Next, thrust on Syrian centricity and rights-based approaches aim to empower Syrians. In the light of the above statement, has the administrative accountability improved? Justify your argument. As we have discussed as you can see, for almost all the questions you are writing the similar answer, right? In terms of all the questions you are talking about only some 3-4 things: empowerment, participation, accountability. That is what we say. In public administration, you have to get good marks. You should know 5 terms: participation, transparency, accountability, decentralization, and empowerment. These 5 terms you can use in all the questions and get 300 marks. On the other hand, the moment you think that it is very difficult, you will never get marks. As the essay topic we will be discussing day after tomorrow, simplicity is the most important form of sophistication. The more the things you make them simple, the more your ability to understand the things. You can make the things simple only when you understand them in a clear-cut manner. On the other hand, if you look at the answers that people write, they will be beating around not the bushes, they will be beating around the forest, they will be beating around the continents, they will be beating around the entire nature without answering the question. That is what, for every question, it is only about participation, transparency, accountability, decentralization, and empowerment. These are all the 5 magic words in public administration. Not only public administration, entire ethics paper about these things only. In ethics, you include values. That is the only thing. So coming back here, that is what the question says here. Thrust on the Syrian centricity and rights-based approach aim to empower Syrians. In the light of the above, has administrative accountability improved? Justify your argument. Basically, we have to critically analyze what happened in India in the last 25 years in the name of Syrian centricity and a rights-based approach. This rights-based approach we have followed especially from 2005 onwards. after UPA government came to power. Right to education, right to health, right to food, right to work, and Forest and Tribal Rights Acts. Syrian centricity, from bureaucracy centric to Syrian centric. Now, in spite of introducing all those radical reforms, ultimately at the end of the day, the question that is being asked here is, has there any improvement in administrative accountability? We have implemented so many reforms, citizen charters, social audits, public-private partnerships, rights-based approaches, digital governance, 73rd, 74th amendments, outcome budgets. These were all the radical reforms that we have implemented. But the question, the million-dollar question, nowadays $1 million nobody is talking about, $1 trillion question is, has it resulted in administrative accountability or not? Critically analyze, justify your argument. So what can you say? You can definitely say that there has been drastic improvement, but there are major problems. Why? Because all those reforms have been implemented mostly in letter but never in spirit. All of them have been implemented mostly in letter but never in spirit. And most importantly, most worryingly, the structures which were expected to implement the reforms remained the same as before reform period. Colonial structures. There was no change in the structures, nor was there any change in the attitudes, values and behaviors. Citizens' awareness has increased. It has not resulted in improvement in administrative accountability. That is what we have to say, and then talk about what are the solutions. I think all the solutions are there in our notes. We have given hundreds of solutions, knowing fully well that every year you have to write the same thing, because they will never be implemented. Why they are never implemented? If they are implemented, what kind of questions UPSC will ask then? So that is what we say. That is the reason why every year the same questions will be repeated with the changes in the statements. Let us go to the second part, section B. Comparative public administration started with no paradigm of its own and developed none. This is one of the criticisms made by one of the CPA thinkers only, Peter Savage. This is the statement made by Peter Savage, one of the thinkers of CPA only. He was the editor of the magazine that was published by CPA group between 1969 and 1974. And out of frustration, when CPA was a failure, he made this statement saying that CPA was a failure because it started with no paradigm of its own and developed no paradigm of its own. Unfortunately, the entire effort made by CPA thinkers was completely a waste of time. As we have discussed, the major criticism against CPA was that they simply could not come out with any theory. They could not come out with any theory. They could not come out with their own conclusion. You can see here, classical thinkers, they have their own set of theories and principles. Behavioral thinkers, have their own set of theories and principles. What did CPA contribute, significantly? That is where they have failed. Now the question here is that why they started with no paradigm and why they could not develop any paradigm of their own is what you have to write. Why they could not start with any paradigm of their own? Why? Because as we discussed, CPA thinkers, what the problem with them is, they had set for themselves extremely ambitious targets. They said that they wanted to formulate a universal theory. How? By taking different paradigms together. They said that they wanted to formulate a universal theory by adopting deductive approach to theory formulation. They said that they wanted to formulate a universal theory by adopting ecological approach. Different approaches they have taken. They said that they would want to come out with a universal theory by adopting structural functional approach. And they wanted to come out with a universal theory by adopting what is called from ideographic to adopting what is called from ideographic to nomothetic. They wanted to come out with a universal theory that is applicable to everyone. In the end, they did not have their own identity also. How do we define CPA now? We know what is development administration, right? We know what is classical thinkers. We know what are the ideas of behavioral thinkers. But what is CPA? Except that, this is what exactly Peter Savage also has said. He was very disappointed with CPA. He said that if we have to define CPA tomorrow to future generations, how do we define CPA to them? At the end of the day, CPA means, if you are extremely charitable, at the end of the day, CPA means comparing the administrative systems of different countries around the world. Beyond that, nothing else. And this can be done within public administration. You don't require a separate sub-discipline of CPA. That is the reason why CPA at the end of the day had become an integral part of public administration. But after writing all these things, you have to conclude in a positive manner. As identified by the third Minnebrook conference, universal theories in public administration, they are possible only by adopting comparative approach. They may not come out. They did not. They may not come out. They did not come out with any government. That is what we say. What we call it as networking governance. In network governance, this is what we say. Public-private partnerships, markets, hierarchies, and networks. So what we are saying here is that as you can see, almost all the questions are about current developments in public administration only. So, if you are talking about governance now, earlier governance means it was restricted only to institutions like bureaucracy, institutions like political executive, policy formulation, bureaucracy, implementation. They had absolute monopoly, right? They had absolute monopoly. Now, when we talk about governance, this is what we call systems approach. David Easton. So, what are we saying here? The inputs are received by the system. These inputs would go into the system. The process will take place. What really comes out is the output in the form of public policies. They are implemented. Then evaluation will take place. This evaluation again will provide inputs for the process. And everything is interconnected through what is called network governance. So, all the institutions are again interconnected. What are the inputs here? You are talking about the markets, you are talking about NGOs, you are talking about civil society organizations, you are talking about self-help groups, you are talking about media, you are talking about international organizations, you are talking about government bureaucracy. All these institutions are connected with hierarchies, different hierarchies. And all of them combined together represent governance. As we say, governance at this point of time is not restricted to government. Governance is different from government. The government is only one of the institutions of governance. So there are so many other institutions. Nowadays you can see, judiciary has become very integral, very important part of governance because of PILs. The question that was asked in our polity governance paper now. Is it right on the part of a judiciary to enter into the domain of legislature and executive through PILs? They are forced. Why? Because the government is not taking any decisions. For example, take the case of this farmers' agitation. Why judiciary is forced to interfere? Because of unwillingness on the part of the government to engage farmers in fruitful discussion. Judiciary has said that since you are not finding any solution, we are forced to interfere. It is all about networks. It is all about institutions. It is all about coordination between all these institutions. This is what is modern government is all about. That is the reason why, as we have discussed earlier also, new public governance. New public governance is characterized by markets, hierarchies and networks. That is the reason why, as part of new public governance, the most important thing is this digital governance. With the help of digital governance, you are able to ensure coordination between all of them, taking the inputs from all of them, and also involving all of them in implementation process also. That is what we say. And as we have said, ultimately governance is all about reconciling the conflicting interests of all these institutions. For example, private sector is interested in profits, NGOs are interested in protecting the environment, and then caste-based organizations are interested in protecting their rights. Religious-based organizations are interested in protecting their privileges. Markets are interested in profits. Multinational companies are interested in capturing your markets. Small scale sector is interested in protecting their clientele. So many conflicting interests are there, and you have to reconcile these conflicting interests. This is what is called governance in the modern terms. 25-30 years back, none of them were there. 25-30 years back, or you can say 30 years back, the situation was very simple. Governance was very simple, restricted to government only. Next. Yeah. Yes, hierarchies. What are hierarchies? As we have said, hierarchy is another integral part of governance. Who is at at the top, and who is at the middle, and who is at the bottom? Who is expected to? Because so many institutions are involved here, hierarchy will always be an integral part of it. At the top you have the central government, below the state governments, below the local self governments, and within the top also a central government. Hierarchy, again horizontal also, you have judiciary. So you have to manage all these hierarchies. When the central government is coming out with a law for items in the state list, state governments will oppose them. Then the central government has to pacify the state governments, GST. You have to manage the hierarchies also. Governance includes, similarly, government has to manage the private sector, markets, civil society organizations. If you look at civil society organizations and markets, both of them at the equal level. Markets are as much influential as civil society organizations, and you have to manage both of them. Managing horizontal hierarchies will be more difficult than vertical ones. Governance is about managing those. That's what we said, new public governance. Next, has a policy analysis become a major source of legitimation of status quo in political and social order? Discuss. This is what we have spoken about earlier. So what the problem here is that in public policy, the recent trend is more towards what is called incrementalist paradigm. Incrementalist paradigm. And this incrementalist paradigm, as we always say, the basic weakness of this incrementalist paradigm is its status quoist nature. You can never bring about radical or revolutionary changes. That is the reason why nowadays, when radical or revolutionary changes. That is the reason why nowadays, whenever you are talking about this public policy analysis, it has become an excuse to ensure status quo. You are all the time you are giving reasons why you cannot bring about radical changes, rather than coming out with specific solutions regarding how to bring about radical changes. Why? Because whether it is the political order or the social order have a vested interest in keeping status quo. That is where the problem. That is the reason whichever political party, we have discussed all these things as part of criticism of the incrementalist paradigm in our class. If you look at the manifestos of political parties, as I said, 2019 elections, did a single political party promise 1500 IITs and 1500 IIMs, 1500 AIIMS? No. Why not? What did they promise? Here, Congress party promised 72,000 rupees, right, per person. Is it enough? With those 72,000 rupees per annum, per person, right? Can he go to foreign countries for holidays just like Rahul Gandhi had done? They don't. That is what we say. Policy analysis is always an excuse for politicians and the social order to ensure low level of equilibrium. That is where the problem. That is the reason why during this pandemic, the government has the present government has what it has said is that it has said that we have given 500 rupees per month. We have transferred 500 rupees per month into the accounts of women, family members in the family. Is 500 rupees enough? That is where the problem is. That is the reason why we are not able to implement, as I said, in the last 70 years, due to this incrementalist paradigm, we have not been able to implement a single meaningful revolutionary reform. After 70 years also, what the political parties are promising? At the time of elections, 5 kilos of rice or wheat under Food Security Act. 100 days of employment only for one person in a family. What should the rest of the people do in the family? Prepare for UPSC. Okay. So that is what. Why only 100 days? Remaining 250 days, what that person should also do? Prepare for UPSC. That is where the problem is. In rural areas, at least, in urban areas also, what you are doing, you are not doing anything. In the name of UPSC preparation, you are enjoying your life, right? So let us not go into all these unwanted truths also, right? So that is what. That is the reason why policy analysis, as the question has rightly become, major source of legitimation of status quo. So you take any politician or any bureaucrat, what they say is that revolutionary changes are not possible in the society. Did you ever try? You never tried. In the name of policy analysis, what they say is that policies can be successful only when changes are brought out in an evolutionary manner. Slow and steady wins the race. That is where the problem. Because they have a vested interest in ensuring status quo. That is what we have discussed. And what is the solution after writing all these things? What is the solution? The only solution is increasing awareness among the citizens. And as we study in Indian administration, we must move towards a political culture based on cognitions. That is where you have to end your answer. Next, fiscal policy should address the issues of inequity, intricacy and obscurantism. What is this? Very simple. Inequity, it is very direct. That means through fiscal policy, you must redistribute income and wealth in favor of poorer sections of society. That is what is called equity. When the society is unequal, fiscal policy should be the instrument to remove those inequalities. How fiscal policy can do? Progressive taxation and also through subsidies. Second one is intricacy. Intricacy means, what is intricacy? Pardon? Yes, the basic problem with monetary policy is it is very complex in nature. If you remember in the class when we discussed about fiscal and monetary policies, we said that fiscal policy is more useful than monetary policy because it is simple and direct. That is what fiscal policy should do. Fiscal policy should always be more simple. Give the example here. Why GST has been criticized so much in India? It has become extremely complex with so many rates. You have 0%, 5%, 12%, 18%, 27%, and then above 27%. And then there are some goods which are not in GST also. There are so many slabs. You are only counting the slabs, which becomes extremely complicated. It is an extremely wrong fiscal policy. As we say, ultimately India should move towards a GST rate of only two slabs, 5% and 12%. Beyond that, nothing else. That is what the second point talks about. Third one is obscurantism. What does it mean that? Pardon? Against? Opposing changes. So this is what we say. Fiscal policy should not come in the way of growth and development of the countries. It should help, not hinder the growth and development. Why this is important? The present fiscal policy of the government, the fiscal policies will always say, we study in economics, they should be always counter-cyclical fiscal policies. Counter-cyclical means if you have recession, fiscal policy should be expansionary in nature to overcome the recession. That means they should not come in the way of development. They should remove all the obstacles to development. For example, if the government is sincere, courageous and brave in this year budget, what we should expect from our finance minister? Move towards a GST with two slabs. Revolutionary. Take the step. That is what they say. In Hindi also there is saying, "Dar ke aage jeet hai." Beyond fear, you have only victory. So as long as you have this increment list, the government says that we are moving some items from 12% to 18%. We are shifting some items from 27% to 18%. That is what is called increment list. This will never be helpful. You must have the guts to take radical reforms. That is what the government must say that we are putting. For example, now Joe Biden, what he has said is that he is coming out with more than $1.3 trillion financial support to the population. That means every American would be getting at least $1,200 in his account. And how much the government has put in the accounts of people? 500 rupees. That too only one family, not for every person. That is where you need a radical fiscal policy which can overcome the obstacles. That is what you have to write. For all these kind of questions, as I keep on saying, you need a very good knowledge of Indian economy. Next, prevention of misconduct requires institutionalization of ethical values at the political and administrative levels. This is a question that normally is asked in the ethics paper. but we can see these things in our public administration also. So basically what we require is that the basic problem with countries like India is that we have not created institutions which can withstand erratic behavior on the part of the individuals who are manning those institutions. It means that we have not created a strong ethical infrastructure in the country. And this is possible, as the question says, only when we can institutionalize ethical values at political and administrative levels. How to institutionalize ethical values at political and administrative levels? By implementing reforms, electoral reforms. For example, any person who is convicted, even for a single day, should be debarred from contesting elections for the rest of his life, so that automatically people will become good. Similarly, in administration also, the question that was asked also in a particular governance paper, in administration also, any person who is proved of incapability must be removed from Indian administration. I think we have given not one or two, we have given 1 to trillion solutions, I think. You can write any of them. Next, administrative ideas must be seen in the context of environment in which they develop. In the light of the above statement, examine the influence of NPM and ICT on comparative study of public administration. First, let us understand the question. So, what have you understood by this question? Yes, ecological factors, right. Ecological factors are the ones which influence reforms in any other country. In the light of the statement, examine the influence of NPM and ICT on comparative study of public administration. So, as we studied as part of CPA, if you remember in our class we have spoken about the present status of a comparative public administration. In the present status of comparative public administration, we have said that CPA nowadays focuses on the latest developments in public administration. NPM was introduced in developed countries and it was successful. Why it is not successful in developing countries? So that developing countries can learn from the success stories of other countries. Similarly, digital governance. America, it is highly successful. Why it is not successful in India? So the question talks about NPM and this ICT. Why they were successful in those countries and why they are not? Public-private partnership. As part of NPM, public-private partnership. Why it was highly successful? If you remember, we have discussed all these things. In United Kingdom, when they introduced public-private partnership as part of NPM, initially this public-private partnership had only resulted in private sector monopoly. If you remember, this is what we have discussed about public-private partnerships. So what we have said is that United Kingdom, when Margaret Thatcher introduced NPM, in the name of NPM, what did she do? She had closed down most of the public sector enterprises and she had given the private sector monopoly over service delivery mechanisms. And what was the outcome? They could not achieve any of the objectives. Two important objectives. One is to reduce the fiscal deficits. Second one is to provide quality goods and services to citizens at competitive prices. Both of them were not achieved. Why? Because once the private sector had monopoly, they have fixed very high prices. The money came from the government, third party government, private sector and citizens. Hollow state. So the government had given the contract to the private sector to provide services to the citizens, and the money will be paid by the government on behalf of the citizens. I gave you the example of this passport the privatization services. Before this was implemented, UK citizens, they paid around 5 to 6 pounds and they used to get the passport in 2 to 3 weeks. After this NPM, they paid almost 15 to 20 pounds and it was taking them 2-3 months also. And that is when UK had realized that there is something seriously wrong with their public-private partnerships. That is when they introduced a new concept called value for money. Did we discuss all these things? VFM? Yes, they introduced value for money concept. And this is what India can learn through comparative studies. This is what you have to write for this question. What we can learn from those countries: ecological systems, environmental factors. That is what we study in comparative public administration. What do we say in comparative public administration? Grafting is better than transplantation. We have to create necessary conditions. And give another example, citizen charters, why they have been successful. Here they have asked about only 2 things, NPM and ICT. Give the example of digital governance, why it was successful in those countries and why it is not. In India, why it is not successful? In the name of e-governance, we only implemented e-government. This is what we have discussed. You write about all those things. As you can see here, whether for good or bad, we can answer all the questions from our class notes. As I keep on saying, it is only about relating the question to what you have studied. Understanding the question is what is very important. People say the question paper is too analytical. I say that the question paper is too simple. Why? Because once you have the conceptual clarity, automatically it becomes easier for you to answer all the questions. If you look at this is what we studied, the present status of comparative public administration, wherein we spoke about all these things. E-governance, why it was successful in America, why it is not successful in India. In America it was successful because the political culture was participative political culture. In UK it was successful because bureaucracy considered themselves to be the true servants of people. In India it is not successful because the structures are colonial, attitudes are colonial. We have only implemented structural reforms but not behavioral reforms. We have not increased awareness among the citizens. When our Prime Minister says that Digital India is successful, you can take that with a pinch of salt, which is not enough. If you don't have any BP, problems with BP, for those who have high BP, they cannot take too much of salt. You can take the statements of our Prime Minister with all the salt in all the oceans around the world. That is what we say. Why it is not successful? We have implemented only e-government but not e-governance. That is where we can learn from other countries through comparative public administration. Next, affirmative action in the socio-economic development has not altogether eliminated discrimination. Discussed in the context of women empowerment. This is what we have discussed so much in our classes. And the same thing was asked as essay also this year, patriarchal societies. The basic problem is that this affirmative action has not resulted in any elimination of discrimination, especially when it comes to women. And what kind of affirmative action we have in our country as far as women are concerned? What kind of affirmative action we have in our country as far as women are concerned? Only reservations in local self-governments, right? The only affirmative action we have is reservations in local self-governments. Do we have reservations in public services, civil services for women? In some state governments, they are there, in some state governments. But is it a proportion to their population? In some state governments. But is it a proportion to their population? Is it in proportion to their population? Not at all. Now the question here is, you know, why this affirmative action has not resulted in eliminating discrimination, especially when it comes to women. That is what we have to focus, analysis. Why? Why? Because in the first place, this affirmative action was never implemented. In case of women, it was never implemented, right? The reservations for women was implemented only in local self-governments, but not in state assemblies or parliament. The 33% reservations for women bill in parliament is still hanging in parliament. When it will see the, when will it become reality? It never. Yes, never. And similarly, within the government also, are there any reservations for women? Like we have nowadays, government has introduced reservations for scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, OBCs, and EBCs. But why not women? Who are the most vulnerable sections of our society? Is it scheduled castes or scheduled tribes? No, it is women. They are the most vulnerable. Why? Because whether it is forward caste or backward caste, what kind of societies we have? Patriarchal societies. They are male dominated societies. And what is the reason why this affirmative action was not at all implemented? As we have discussed in the class, women are not a powerful pressure group in India. Public policies are always about politics. The reason why the government implemented reservations for OBCs, because OBCs vote in the name of caste identity. The reason why the government continues with the reservation for scheduled castes, because vote bank politics. Same is the case with scheduled tribes. But women in India do not vote on the basis of gender. They do not vote on the basis of their security. They do not vote on the basis of their empowerment. They do not vote on the basis of their independence. They do not vote on the basis of their participation in governance. Mostly the votes of women were mostly decided by the men in the families. That is the reason why women empowerment has not become a reality. So what is the solution? As we say, increase awareness among women. For example, Nitish Kumar tried to develop this women constituency in Bihar. He was the one who tried to tap the potential of women. That is the reason why in Bihar he had given 50% reservations for women in local self-governments. He has increased it from 33% to 50%. That is the reason why he started giving bicycles to girl child. That is the reason why he started giving implementing more developmental schemes to women. But that was not at all sufficient. What is more required is changes in the attitudes, changes in the political culture of the country. For that, women have to come together. We have a political party for one religion. We have a political party for another religion, majority religion as well as minority religion. You have a political party for forward caste as well as backward caste. But do we have a political party for women, of women, by women? No. That is where the problem. So that is what you have to focus, because as you can see, all these questions are highly analytical. They are expecting you to understand your society and come out with creative solutions. Next, have political realities thwarted the move towards evidence-based policy making? Critically examine. So let us try to understand this question. Evidence-based policy making means what? Evidence-based policy making means rational decision making. Basically, your entire ability lies in, as I keep on saying, making the things simple. Evidence-based empirical decision making, which is nothing but rationalist paradigm. And the first part of the question says, this incrementalist paradigm dominating rationalist paradigm. Political realities. Most of the time as we study public policies are what politics is all about. The objective of any public policy is to win elections and retain power. They come out with what is called short-term political populism. You can give hundreds of examples. What we can give here, in the last 25 years in India, what we are witnessing is political populism dominating public policies of all state as well as central governments. Thanks to liberalization, privatization, globalization, the country has witnessed exponential increase in the revenues of the governments. The budget of union government in 1991 was less than 1 lakh crores. And what is the budget of the central government last year? 30 lakh crores. From 90,000 crores, it has increased to 30 lakh crores. And what is the amount of money spent by the government on capital expenditure? What is the amount of money spent by the government on productive employment? What is the amount of money spent by the government on infrastructure? The proportion of capital expenditure in overall budget is coming down drastically in spite of huge amount of increase in the revenues of the government. Why? The question. Political realities, what? The move towards evidence-based policy making. Now, what does the economic realities talk about? Economic realities say that the government must focus on investment, must focus on capital formation, must focus on productive expenditure. And political compulsions would say that give them more subsidies. In the last 6 years, if you remember, those who have completed our Indian administration classes also, this is what we have said. In the last 6 years, what the present government has done is, they have moved more aggressively towards socialistic policies. The only difference between UPA and the present NDA government is, in the UPA government, they also had hundreds of policies, but they were never implemented in an efficient manner. In the NDA regime, in the last 6 years, the amount of money spent by the government on this subsidies and welfare has increased exponentially, but with a key difference. They made sure that most of the benefits would reach the targeted sections of society by using digital technology, because of which they returned to power in 2019. Otherwise, this political populism trumps all the time economic rationality. And the country is facing severe financial crisis only because of this political populism. That is what you have to say. Critically examine, yes. And then you have to talk about the solutions also towards the end. You have to talk about outcome budgets. You have to talk about FRBM implementation, reducing the fiscal deficits. You have to talk about reducing the revenue deficit to zero. You have to talk about application of sunset legislation to most of developmental and welfare schemes. As you can see here, you need good knowledge of public policy, financial administration, development administration and Indian economy, politics combined together. Next, globalization is impacting the context of national policy making. The national policy agenda is becoming international. Again, we spoke about this a lot in our public policy analysis. As we said, we always say this globalization has had a major impact on our public policy analysis. In fact, this our public policies, we can say, are more influenced by these global factors than by domestic factors. And not only that, our national policy agenda is also becoming international. What do you mean by our agenda becoming international? It means we are also impacting other countries around the world through our policies. That means other countries are impacting our policies, and second, through our policies we are impacting other countries. That is what we call true globalization. True globalization is a two-way street. You are getting impacted by other countries and you are also impacting other countries. As usual, for these kind of questions, you have to write with lots of examples, as usual. In the first place, why it is happening? Because globalization. India has opened up its economy in 1991. From then onwards, we continuously moved on the path of globalization. Before 1991, India was in complete autarky, closed economic system. So our policies did not impact the rest of the world, and what was happening in the rest of the world also did not impact our policies. From 1991 onwards, we slowly moved towards globalization. Initial period, we were only receiving something from the rest of the world. We were not in a position to contribute to the rest of the world. Especially in the last 10 years or so, because of increasing expansion of our economy. In purchasing power parity, India has become the third largest economy in the world. In nominal GDP, it had become fifth largest economy before it is slipping back to 7th position due to Corona crisis. So, because of these things, we are impacting the rest of the world. The rest of the world is also impacting us. So, what are the examples that you can give here? Take the first case, when the rest of the world is impacting us. How the rest of the world is impacting us? Globalization is impacting the context of national policy making. How? Yes, what are the examples? What are the examples you can give? You need very good knowledge of economy, environment, and polity, everything. If you are good with the GS, you will be good with PubAd, as I keep on saying all the time. Of course, we have discussed all these things in the class also. What are the examples? International trade. Specific examples you give me.
Sir, just like the quota system put down by USSC.
What are the specific examples of globalization impacting our national policies? In public policy, if you remember in our class, we have discussed something. Policies, it is normally we say that it is the politics that influence the policies. But what we are witnessing in recent times? Policies impacting politics. There I gave you so many examples. Right? For example, FRBM. Why did we come out with this FRBM legislation? To reduce our fiscal deficits. Why? If your fiscal deficits are very high, your financial situation will be much worse. At the global level, your ratings will be very low. When your ratings are low, the cost of borrowing will be very high. That is the reason why even during this corona pandemic crisis also, the government has not increased its expenditure for fear of increasing the fiscal deficits. FRBM legislation. Then what are the other examples you can give? WTO, World Trade Organization. When India had become signatory to the World Trade Organization, we had to provide MFN status to every other country, and also we had to adhere to some of the provisions of WTO, like reducing our subsidies and other things. Similarly, when we took loans from IMF and World Bank, we were also forced to open up our economy, liberalization, privatization, and globalization. This is what earlier times. Now, our policy is impacting rest of the world. For example, again go back to these WTO negotiations. What is the reason why WTO could not come to an agreement in the recent previous summits of WTO. India has strongly objected to any kind of reduction in agricultural subsidies, food subsidies, because of which we could not reach an agreement. India single-handedly has prevented the WTO from coming to an agreement, because under WTO provisions, a policy can be formulated only when all the member countries accept that policy. India had become so powerful that rest of the world simply could not do anything when we said that we want to protect our subsidies, we want to protect our farmers. The subsidies we are giving to our farmers are needed for their sustenance. We cannot remove those subsidies. And we have protected. And our policies impacted the rest of the world. Then similarly, you take other policies. Our policies regarding this reducing carbon emissions. India has voluntarily said that they will reduce carbon emissions. This is what ultimately that has also become part of Paris summit also. India also has said that we will move towards more green energy. That also has impacted the rest of the world. Similarly, our policies on nuclear disarmament also is impacting the rest of the world. We have become so strong that similarly in recent times, India had so much of conflict with America. India has increased customs and excise duties. And America, when Trump, still he is the president. After a few hours, he will become a former president. Trump was always speaking against India, calling India tariff king of the world because of the huge amount of customs and excise duties. That is how we are impacting our economic policies, our trade policies, our security related policies, our financial policies, our environmental policies are impacting the rest of the world. You have to give all those examples. Next, collaboration and its cognates for public service delivery needs to be viewed from governance lenses. Again, every question is the same at the end of the day. So what is the question here? Collaboration and its cognates for public service delivery need to be viewed from governance lenses. What do we mean by this? What are the things you have understood from this statement? First, that is, let me try to find out. One thing that you have understood is collaboration. Second one is public service delivery. Third one is governance. Right? Try to interlink all of them. When it comes to public service delivery mechanisms, in recent times, what we have moved towards is public-private partnership, collaboration between public and private organizations as part of a hollow state and third-party governments. Collaboration and its cognates. Cognates means its supplements. That means what are the other things apart from collaboration? We have public-private partnerships, we have NGOs, we have civil society organizations. All of them have become part of service delivery mechanisms in recent times. And they should be viewed from governance lenses. That means they should be viewed from the perspective of governance. That means what we say here is more than the instruments. What is important is the outcome. You cannot have privatization of service delivery mechanisms. You cannot have public-private partnerships for the sake of having them. You need this kind of collaboration. You need this kind of public-private partnerships. You need this kind of collaboration between the government, NGOs and private sector only with the objective of improving governance. That is what the question says. Now why? Why? Because earlier, as we have discussed, governance was restricted only to government. It was the bureaucracy which was the sole institution which was responsible for service delivery mechanisms. And in a welfare state, as we have discussed in the previous questions, bureaucracy was responsible morally but not accountable legally. People were treated as subjects to be governed. Then from there we move towards public-private partnership as part of NPM. But unfortunately, what happened with public-private partnerships? As we have discussed, it resulted only in crony capitalism, unholy nexus between public and private sector, government and industry. That is the reason why collaboration and its cognates. Apart from private sector, we are talking about now NGOs, civil society organizations, beneficiary groups, and everyone else, by including them in service delivery mechanisms. As we study multiple service delivery mechanisms and institutional pluralism. And we have to look at all these things from the perspective of governance, whether they are improving governance or not. Improving governance means here, what we are talking about here, when we talk about improving governance from the perspective of service delivery mechanisms, when improving governance from the perspective of service delivery mechanisms means what? As we have discussed earlier also in the previous questions, two things. Whether they are reducing the expenditure of the government in providing these services. Second, whether they are able to provide efficient quality services to the citizens. Third, whether they are able to provide these services at a very low price to the citizens. Fourth, whether they are able to provide responsive services to the citizens also. All these things must be taken into consideration whenever the government talks about these things. That is the reason why, as recommended by Shanta Kumar committee also regarding PDS, what it has suggested is that this PDS should be replaced with food stamps or give money directly to the people or food stamps. That is what you have to write for these questions. As you can see, most of the questions will have similar kind of answers. Next, administrative reform is an artificial inducement of administrative transformation against resistance. Kaiden. Identify the nature of resistance and inducement requires to overcome it. In fact, in our test series which we have finished just before the mains, I just gave the same question, exactly the same question, including same spelling mistakes. We have to maintain consistency also, right? So that is what are the factors which come in the way of administrative reforms. As we study in administrative reforms in Indian administration, this question should be asked in Indian administration, but they have asked in paper 1. There is no difference between paper 1 and paper 2. They can ask. The only thing is that the same question will be there next year in your political governance paper also. Next year the same question will be there in ethics paper. After that the same question will be there in your essay paper. So that is what. So what we say that is an artificial inducement of administrative transformation against resistance. Identify the nature of resistance. Why the reforms are opposed. I think in our class notes we have given hundreds of reasons why there is resistance to reforms. Most administrative reforms have political costs, we have said. Reforms result in transparency, accountability, decentralization, and empowerment of citizens. Whereas bureaucracy and political executive believes in secrecy, discretion, centralization, and complete absence of accountability mechanisms. That is the reason why we have incrementalist paradigm, which only ensures status quo, elite mass model. And then what are the inducements that are required to overcome it? What are the inducements? Positive reinforcers as well as negative reinforcers. You must identify the good people and reward them. You must identify the wrong people and punish them. We need good people in politics, electoral reforms. We need good people in administration, civil services reforms. You talk about all those reforms again. What should be done? I think this is a very direct question. In our class notes, we have given so many recommendations. What should be done? Disruptive nature of developments in information technology has changed the contours of e-governance in the last 1 decade. Analyze. And you will be surprised to know that the same question was asked in your general studies papers this year, paper 3, about cyber security. The same questions. As I keep on saying, if you are good with your public administration, you will be answering all your questions in general studies papers also. What are the disruptive nature of developments in information technology? Disruptive nature of developments in information technology in the last 10 years. What are the disruptive nature of developments in information technology that in the last 10 years we have seen? All the problems related to cyber security. What are the problems? What are the problems in cyber security? Those who have studied computers. Phishing, then deepfakes. Today in Hindu newspaper also it had come. Then cyber crimes, malwares, ransomware, malwares. Then unfortunately in recent times you have seen Nidhi Rajdan. You feel bad for her. She had left her lucrative job in NDTV, and she had informed everyone that she is going to America to work as assistant professor there. Okay, these are all cyber crimes. Unfortunate. Everyone can fall prey to these kind of crimes. And then what else? This expansion of social media, post-truth phenomena. Thanks to this IT, you get so many WhatsApp forwards thinking that they are all true. Right? Spreading of lies, spreading of hatred, spreading of poison, venom among the communities. These are all the disruptive elements in information technology. Has it changed the contours of e-governance in the last 1 decade? And of course, all these other crimes related to financial crimes using cyber technology. Very easily people can hack into your accounts. They can withdraw all the money from your accounts. They can hack your credit cards and debit cards. All these kind of financial crimes also. You can see that have changed the contours of e-governance in the last 1 decade. How it has changed the contours of e-governance? There is a lot of hesitation among the people to adopt e-governance. Lot of hesitation. Why? Because of the safety and security of this e-governance. And that is the reason why the government's attempts to make e-governance successful also have not been that much fruitful also. Because as some time back in Hindu or Indian Express newspaper, there was one article 1 week or 10 days back about how and why this digital governance cannot be that much successful. For example, the money is credited into your account. You are living in, they have given the example of Bihar, wherein the money was credited into the accounts of the job card holders of NREGA. Through e-governance it was credited. To withdraw the money, because their village, the bank branch is at least 30 kilometers from their village. So they have to travel at least to those 15-20 kilometers, then withdraw the money and come back. Travel expenses, and for that 1 or 2 days, because it will not be done in 1 day. Because there is only one single bank branch for 20-30 villages, there will be hundreds of people. You have to go there 2-3 days. The cost of withdrawing the money is more than the amount of money that is being credited into your account. That is where the problem is. That is the reason why, what the government should do now to make e-governance successful, it has to make e-governance safe, secure, easy, accessible and responsive. Then only e-governance can be successful. In India, these things we study in our general studies paper 3, in cyber security. India is still using second generation cyber security technologies. Western countries are using 5th generation cyber security technologies. You can see how backward we are. That is the reason why whenever the government, you can see how backward we are. That is the reason why whenever the government, take the recent CoWIN app also, it has found there are so many glitches. Take the case of UPSC website also. The moment the results come, 100 people log onto the website, it crashes forever. That is where the problems. So all these things have completely radically transformed e-governance. There is a lot of hesitancy among the people to adopt e-governance for all these things. And then you talk about what can be done also. You have to focus on creating the infrastructure. Bandwidth should be there. You have to focus on adopting cyber security measures, the 5th generation cyber security measures. You have to focus on creating physical infrastructure to supplement cyber infrastructure. And you have to focus on creating people-friendly applications. And most importantly, you have to implement other reforms. As we studied, e-government is necessary but not sufficient. What is required is e-governance. Next, performance management framework enables a clear line of sight between planning, measuring and monitoring performance. Critically analyze. This is what we study in personal administration. If you remember, this is what we have studied as part of the second Administrative Reforms Commission recommendations regarding performance management. What we have said is that this performance evaluation that is done now should be replaced with PMES, Performance Management and Evaluation Systems. If you remember, those who have attended Indian administration, we have spoken about all these things, right? And what is this PMES? It is a very comprehensive one. It first fixes the targets, then informs the people, then links the performance. They interlink individual performance, group, institution performance, and then it will be used as a motivating factor. As part of performance evaluation, which is continuous in nature, the employees will be given an opportunity to evaluate their own performance also. And at the same time, if there are any major lacuna in their performance, they will be asked to rectify those mistakes. And also, it focuses on what we call job enrichment. They will be asked to identify their areas of study, their areas of work specialization, so that they can focus more on those areas, job enrichment. And ultimately, this performance evaluation is used in a constructive manner to benefit the employee as well as the organization. That is what we say. Critically analyze. Critically analyze. What is the basic problem with this kind of performance evaluation? As we have discussed with the earlier also, this kind of performance evaluation is very difficult in bureaucracy. Why? Because those who are working in staff organizations, they don't have any real powers of decision making. Those who are working in field organizations do not have any freedom. So how do you evaluate a performance? Especially in India, within our bureaucracy, still accountability mechanisms are only internal. They are not external. That is where the problem is. Our Prime Minister, if you remember, while talking about these things in the class, I have said that our Prime Minister was keen to introduce 360-degree performance evaluation. The batch of 1989 IAS officers, the government wanted to promote them on the basis of this 360-degree performance evaluation. But it was not done. It could not be done also. Why? Because to implement those reforms, you need to implement all other reforms. You should move towards, as we study this domain expertise, then only performance evaluation can be objective. You should move towards promotions based on merit. But in India, what we have is only neo-patrimonial bureaucracy. That is where the problem. You have to write about all those things. Next, objectives of performance budgeting include improving expenditure prioritization, effectiveness and efficiency. Has performance budgeting worked effectively in government system? Agree, argue. Again, I have given the same question in our test series also. Basically, the question says that whether this performance budgeting has been successful or not. As we say, the objective of performance budgeting is to link inputs expenditure to outputs and outcomes. This performance budgeting had come into existence due to the failure of or due to the limitations of line item budget. It was the second Hoover Commission that has suggested this performance budgeting. It was introduced in the United States of America in 1949 and it continued till 1965, till when it was replaced with PPBS, Planning, Programming, Budgeting Systems. And why this performance budgeting has not been successful? It was successful to a large extent, but it has not been successful. Has performance budgeting worked effectively in government system? Not much. Why? Why? Because the basic problem with performance budgeting is that it can be applied only to few departments and ministries, wherein the performance can be evaluated in quantitative terms. For example, how do I evaluate the performance of the Ministry of External Affairs? How do I evaluate the performance of Defense Ministry? When the Chinese army attacked India, they entered into Indian borders and 20 Indian soldiers died last year in the border clashes. Does it mean that Defense Minister should resign immediately? That is what is performance budgeting. Does it mean that in the next year defense budget we should cut down the amount given to the army? That is what is performance budgeting, right? Yes? That is where the problem is. How do you apply performance budgeting to this health ministry? In a corona crisis, our health ministry has has failed to prevent the spread of corona. So should the health minister be resigning? In the next year's budget, health budget should be drastically cut down, right? Similarly, take the case of education ministry or human resource development. According to ASCR report, All India School Education report, a 9th standard student in Bihar cannot even do the sums of 2nd standard. That means education minister should resign. Should we cut down our education budget? Should we put an end to Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan? That is where the problem is. The problem with performance budgeting is that it can be applied only to few areas, few ministries and few activities. Next thing is that, next problem with this performance budgeting, as we have discussed, is within the government. All the time this is what we say, budget is always a political exercise. Monies are allocated only on the basis of policies, on the basis of priorities of the government. It is not done on the basis of performance of those policies. As we studied with David Easton, what is the problem with this incrementalist paradigm? What is the problem with incrementalist paradigm? In David Easton, a program or a policy, if it is a failure, it does not mean that it will be discontinued. On the other hand, a program or a policy, if it is successful, it does not mean that it will be continued. Why? Because all policy decisions are political in nature. That is where again problem with performance budgeting. You have to write all those things. And that is the reason why in India we never really bothered to implement performance budgeting. Of course, 1955, this committee on parliamentary committee, estimates committee has recommended introduction of performance budgeting. The last year's budget also has said that they are implementing performance budgeting in most of the ministries and departments. But we don't know where and how it is being implemented. That is where the problem is. So this is the things that you have to write for all these questions. As you can see here, the entire question paper, the game lies only in understanding the questions. The moment you understand the questions, they look ridiculously simple. And the moment you understand the questions, you realize one thing: whatever may be the question, you are writing the Same answer. You are talking about transparency, accountability, participation. You are talking about transparency, accountability, participation. You are talking about multiple service delivery mechanisms. You are talking about transforming moral responsibility into legal accountability. You are talking about reforms all the time. So this is what about this paper 1, and tomorrow we will look at Indian administration paper 2, and over the next 4 days we will be doing GS papers also. Tomorrow is what, Friday? Tomorrow is Thursday. Friday we will take up this essay, and Saturday I will take up this polity governance paper, and Monday, I think Tuesday is 26 January. So Monday we will not have anything, and next Wednesday and Thursday I will take up a paper 3 and ethics paper. As you can, when I discuss those papers also, you will find that the questions are not difficult at all. If you are following newspapers regularly, they are not difficult at all. Main examination, I always say, is not difficult at all. The problem is always with prelims. If you clear prelims, clearing the mains and interview will be very easy. Only thing is you need good writing skills, and you need very speed also. You must be writing very fast also. Even this year also, most of our students could not complete the paper because you have to write so much. Practice. Make sure that you are practicing a lot. So tomorrow we will take up Indian administration. Indian administration is very easy paper, very direct questions. Tomorrow at the same time, 2 o'clock, we will take up Indian administration.